The last census, the 1850 census, I told you that the 1850, the 1860, and the 1870 were all pretty much the same as far as the kind of information that we're looking for. And that's true. Okay. I wanted to show you a blank 1860 census and show you, see the columns are all the same, the name, the age, the sex, the color, profession. Here's the only difference. Here they have value of real estate, and here's value of personal estate. Okay? So that's the only difference. It's still the place you were born, whether you were married, attended school, read or write, deaf, dumb, blind, and insane. Okay? And since the information, the notes that we're going to take are about the same for the 60 as the 70 or the 50, just wanted to show you a quick example of things you have to be careful of. Here's the 1860 census, and this is my great-great-great-grandfather, Silas Horace Tracy. Okay? A quick story about him, and I won't take up much of your time, but at this particular time, just before this census, they were preparing to come from New York to Utah, and there were some rules, okay, that had to be followed in order to be able to come across the plains with the handcart companies. And the rule is that as a child, you had to be with your parents, okay? If you were a husband or a wife, you had to have a husband or a wife, or you couldn't go across the plains. Okay? Those were the rules. Now, back in the early days of the Mormon Church, some men, with the permission of the prophet, were allowed to have more than one wife. And the reason for that was because so many of the men were being murdered because of their beliefs in that church, that there were a lot of women and children who had no fathers to take care of them. So some people were allowed to have more than one wife. Now, Silas Horace, his wife's name was Susan Elmira. Okay, and this is her here, and this is him. Susan's mother, Elizabeth Voorhees, Beebe, she was widowed. Okay, her husband had already died, and she wanted to go across the plains. She couldn't go unless she was married. Okay, that's just a rule of the handcart companies. Didn't want to have stragglers hanging around that nobody was responsible for. So he married her so that she could come over to Utah with the pioneers and settle in New York. The other thing you'll notice here is he has a third wife, Nancy. Now, Nancy is the wife, or was the wife, of his brother Moses. And Moses died in 1858. It was kind of a presumed response that when your brother dies early and he's got a family, one of the other brothers needs to step up and say, "Hey, I'll take care of that family since they're family." Okay? So he married Nancy also to make sure that she was taken care of. That relationship didn't last. She did not like being part of a three-wife family. So she ended up getting divorced later and marrying somebody else. But the point to that long story, I guess, is to understand that Silas, his wife was Elizabeth, who's like 60 years older than him, and the reason is because she wanted to come across the plains. This is his first wife, Elmira, and then there's Nancy. All these children are mixed. In other words, we don't know from this census exactly which child belongs to which mother. Okay, so that becomes a little bit of a nightmare trying to sort all that out. Luckily, I already knew who split off with who, and I took care of that. Okay, so let's go back over here. Here is Susan and Silas, and here's all their children. Okay, so James Thomas is the first kid, but he died on the plains on the way to Utah, so he's not there. We did see him, and so forth and so on. So we do know that, and we'll go back to this census right now. Here's Licinius, okay, 9 years old, born in Iowa. Most of these children, if not all, belong to Silas and Elmira. We'll go over here and go to Nancy, and then go to her husband Moses, and this is all their children. Okay, so that's how I knew who went to what. But anyway, let's look at the notes for her. Now it says that she was widowed, but that's really not true. She got married like, well, let's go take a look. It says that she married him in April, and the census was taken in July. So they were really married. So my previous thoughts about her being widowed is not true. So I'm going to change that. And I'm going to change this to family, because she does have children. She is married. They are her children. So yeah. Okay. And then if we go to Silas and go to his real wife, or his first wife, I guess I should say, not real, but 1860, married with family, etc., etc. Okay, that's Susan. And Silas, here's his for 1860. So he's married with a family. And actually he's married 3 times with 2 different families. But there it is. So basically, the information that we want is the same as it is in the 50, but we have to be careful when we're looking at a census. We cannot assume that, you know, everybody is in the right order and belongs to the right wife, especially if you're talking about Mormons in the early, in the 1850s and 60s. Okay. Once the church got settled and things were but a bit more under control, the plural marriage thing was discontinued, and because they were in Utah, nobody was bothering them in Utah, so things were very much a different place. But basically, anyway, that's the 1860 census and a little quick story about my great-great-grandfather.